I moved into that neighborhood in North Carolina because it looked peaceful. Clean houses, a quiet street, people who waved even if they didn't know you. It felt safe in a way I hadn't felt in years. I had been through a rough divorce and wanted a place where I could reset my life without feeling like the world was pressing down on me. The house had a small backyard that connected to the HOA walking path. I used it every evening with my dog, a big yellow lab named Juno. That path became part of my routine, something that grounded me when life felt out of control. The first strange thing I noticed was how fast the woods grew thicker once you stepped off the main route. The HOA kept the path clean, but only a few feet off it. Everything was overgrown. Vines, brush, moss, fallen branches. It was wild enough that you could lose sight of the houses even though they were right behind you. It never bothered me until the day Juno pulled toward the bushes near the small creek that ran behind the neighborhood. I figured she smelled an animal. When I pulled the branches back, I saw a dark opening in the dirt wall beside the creek. It took a second for my eyes to adjust. It wasn't a natural hole. It was shaped like an old drainage tunnel, but smaller than what the county usually installed. The opening was about 4 feet across, and the inside went deeper than I could see. At first, I assumed the HOA or county had built it decades earlier for water runoff, but the inside didn't look like a water tunnel. The walls were reinforced with old wooden beams. Some were rotting, some looked newer, like someone had replaced them. I didn't want to crawl inside, but Juno was fixated on it. She kept pulling toward the entrance and whining. That part bothered me. She never acted anxious outside. She was the calmest dog I'd ever had. For the first few weeks, I stayed away from it. I didn't want to get involved in anything weird. I had moved there to get peace of mind, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I walked the path, I felt like something was different around that part of the woods. Sometimes there were footprints in the mud that weren't there the day before. They were faint but human size. One morning I found the branches pulled back more than I had left them. It looked like someone had cleared the entrance. I finally decided to look inside. I brought a flashlight and waited until the trail was empty. The tunnel went farther than I expected. The floor was packed dirt, not concrete. A few feet in, I found scraps of old cloth, maybe from a blanket, then a rusted metal cup. The air had a stale smell, like dirt mixed with something old. I kept going until the entrance behind me looked like a small circle of daylight. The tunnel turned slightly to the right and dropped lower. That's when I saw something that made me step back. There were tire tracks, small ones, like from a wagon or a cart. They were fresh. I backed out fast. I didn't run, but I moved quickly enough that Juno got excited and started pulling me toward the path. I told myself it was probably kids messing around, but the tracks looked too organized. Someone was hauling things in or out of that tunnel. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound paranoid. A few nights later, I heard something in my backyard. Not animals. Slow footsteps on leaves. Juno growled, something she almost never did. When I looked out the window, I saw a shape near the tree line. It wasn't close to the house, but it was standing still like it was listening. I couldn't make out details. Just a person-shaped shadow. When I turned on my porch light, it moved back into the woods. I called the HOA security number they gave us when we moved in. The guy who answered said they didn't patrol at night and told me to call the sheriff if I saw someone trespassing. I felt stupid calling over a shadow, so I didn't. The next morning, the branches near the creek tunnel were pushed aside again, and this time I found something new. A notebook. The cover was soaked from the creek moisture. When I opened it, the first few pages were blank, but the middle had writing. Not full sentences, more like observations. Short notes listing times and dates, descriptions of people walking the path, even descriptions of dogs. I flipped through the pages and found one that mentioned the woman in the blue jacket with the yellow dog. That was me. The dates went back months before I moved in, and then continued through the exact days I had walked the trail. I wanted to report it, but I also felt like I needed more proof. I took the notebook home and put it in my bottom drawer. That night I heard footsteps again. This time they were closer. When I went to the back sliding door, Juno pressed her nose against it and growled deeper than I had ever heard. There was someone standing behind the shed next to the fence. They stayed just long enough for me to see the top of their shoulder and part of their head. Then they stepped back behind the shed and disappeared. I didn't sleep much after that. I checked every door twice. I turned on lights, even though I hated sleeping with them on. Around 2 in the morning, I heard something metallic hit the ground outside. I stayed still and listened. There were soft footsteps moving toward the woods. In the morning, I found a long metal tool in the grass. It looked like something used to pry wooden boards. Later that day, I went back to the tunnel entrance. I wanted to see if the tracks were still there. The entrance looked more clear than ever. The branches had been cut, not pushed aside. The inside of the tunnel had fresh footprints. Bigger ones. They weren't mine. Someone had gone in after me and gone farther than I had been willing to go. I kept replaying the thought that whoever was living or hiding down there had written about me in that notebook. They knew I found the entrance. They probably knew I walked that path every evening. Maybe they even saw me take the notebook. I didn't want to confront whoever it was by myself, so I called the sheriff's office. They sent a deputy who didn't seem interested. He took a look from a distance, said it was probably teenagers or homeless people, and told me they'd do occasional patrols. He didn't go inside the tunnel. He didn't take the notebook. That night, I put the notebook on my kitchen table and read through the rest of it. The last few pages were more detailed than the early ones. They mentioned people by description. Man with green backpack. Appears daily at 6:15. Teen with black hoodie. Walks dog. Avoids eye contact. And then more entries about me. Woman with yellow dog walks slower now. Stopped at entrance twice. Watching. She found the tunnel. That line made my stomach drop. The final entry said, she took the book. I didn't go near the trail for almost 2 weeks. I took Juno to a dog park across town instead. One morning, I walked outside to take out the trash and found something under the lid of my bin. It was a piece of paper torn from a notebook. It had one line written on it. You shouldn't have gone in. I packed a bag and stayed with a coworker that night. When I came back the next day, nothing seemed disturbed, but the feeling in the house was different. I checked the backyard and saw new footprints in the mud leading from the woods straight to my fence. That was enough. I called my uncle, told him I needed to move, and started packing. Before I left, I walked down to the trail one last time. The creek tunnel entrance was blocked. Someone had nailed plywood across it, not with old wood, with brand new boards and shiny screws. They covered the entrance so completely you couldn't even see a gap. No footprints around it. No tool marks, just a smooth, clean barrier like someone wanted to erase the opening entirely. I moved out within a week. My uncle asked if I wanted to report anything, but I told him no. I didn't want to deal with the sheriff again. I didn't want anyone thinking I was exaggerating. I just wanted distance. I still take Juno on evening walks in my new place, but I stay on open roads. No wooded trails, no hidden paths, and I never, ever look for what's behind the trees. And sometimes, when I think too much at night, I wonder if whoever was watching that path is still out there. Maybe they found a new tunnel. Maybe they found a new neighborhood. Or maybe they were never living underground at all. Maybe they just used the tunnels to get close to the people they watched. I never imagined anything dangerous could come out of a stormwater tunnel. They were things kids crawled into for dares, or places where teens spray-painted their initials before running home. That's how I always thought of them. Just concrete tubes meant to keep water moving when it rained. Nothing more. When I bought my house on Willow Point Court in Virginia, one of those tunnels sat right at the edge of the cul-de-sac. A large concrete opening, half surrounded by overgrown grass, and a do not enter sign nobody took seriously. Kids rode their bikes into it all the time. I would see them speed toward it, disappear inside, then reappear a minute later like it was some kind of adventure ride. I had no intention of ever setting foot in it. I was in my 30s, working full-time, tired most days, and only wanted a quiet place to settle down after years of moving around for work. The house was small and plain, but the street looked calm. Families walked dogs at night. Neighbors waved. The usual suburban picture. I didn't move there expecting anything unusual. During my second month living there, things started happening that didn't make sense at first. I noticed small piles of sticks left near my driveway, perfectly arranged, almost like little shapes. Then I saw the same thing near my mailbox. I brushed it off as something kids did for fun. The area had a lot of kids, and I didn't want to be the uptight neighbor. But after a few days, the piles turned into something else. One morning, I walked outside and saw a small, rusty metal hook sitting on top of one of the stick arrangements. It looked old and handmade. It didn't match anything a kid would be carrying around. That same week, I started hearing noises at night coming from the direction of the tunnel. Not animals, more like someone dragging something heavy across concrete. My bedroom window faced the street, and when the sound echoed through the cul-de-sac, it bounced between the houses. The first night I tried to ignore it. The second night I heard something like a dull thump, followed by a scraping sound. The third night I heard what sounded like a small object rolling or bouncing out of the tunnel entrance. The next morning there was a dead raccoon sitting near the opening. It looked placed, not like it had died naturally. I didn't like seeing it, but I told myself maybe some animal dragged it out there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about it seemed arranged. A week later it rained hard, the kind of rain that sends water flowing down every street. I watched the runoff rush into the storm drain near my house, and I figured the tunnel must be flooded. Around midnight, I got woken up by a loud banging sound. It was steady, like someone hitting metal against concrete. I got out of bed, looked through the blinds, and saw a faint light coming from the tunnel entrance. It wasn't bright like a flashlight. It flickered, almost like a lantern. I stood there for a long time trying to decide if I should go outside. I didn't. I waited until the light disappeared. The next morning I took a walk toward the tunnel to see if there was any sign of someone being there. There wasn't, but the stick formations were back. 2 of them, one on each side of concrete opening. This time, something was tied to the sticks, a small piece of cloth. It was dirty, torn, and knotted in the center like someone had tried to make a tag. I didn't want to touch it, so I took a picture and planned to ask one of the neighbors if they'd seen anything like it before. But before I could bring it up, something else happened that pushed me deeper into the situation. A teenager from down the street knocked on my door one afternoon. His name was Ryan. He asked if I had seen his younger brother, who'd gone down to the tunnel with some friends earlier, but never came back. It had only been an hour, but he said his brother wasn't answering his phone. He looked worried enough that I grabbed my jacket and went with him. The tunnel looked harmless from the outside, but once we stepped inside, it changed fast. The air was colder than it should have been. The walls were covered in dirt and dark stains. There were footprints everywhere, but they didn't all look like kids' footprints. Some were bigger, spaced farther apart, and came from deeper inside the tunnel. I kept shining my phone light into the darkness, hoping we'd see the kid walking back toward us. We didn't. We walked until the tunnel split into 2 smaller sections. I didn't even know stormwater tunnels could branch out like that. Each branch went in a different direction under the neighborhood. The left one had shallow water flowing through it. The right one was dry but full of old debris, broken boards, plastic crates, rusted buckets. All of it looked like it had been hauled there on purpose. We started calling the kid's name, expecting him to shout back. When he didn't, we followed the dry tunnel for maybe 30 feet. That's when we started seeing the same stick formations I'd seen near my driveway. They were placed along the tunnel wall, each a perfect little shape. Some looked like triangles, some like crooked squares. The deeper we went, the more we saw. In the center of one, someone had placed a small toy, a matchbox car. Ryan recognized it. His brother had brought it with him that morning. We didn't go any deeper. The place felt wrong. The silence wasn't normal silence. It felt watched, heavy, like someone was waiting farther ahead. We backed out fast and called the sheriff's office. They sent 2 deputies. They walked inside for a few minutes, came out, and said the kid probably crawled through another exit and went home. An hour later he showed up at his house, saying he'd wandered out a different opening. He didn't explain much and looked shaken, but physically he was fine. The sheriff closed the case. That should have been the end of it, but the activity near the tunnel got worse. Almost every night, I heard the same dragging sound, the same thump, sometimes the flickering light. Then one night, I heard something that made every hair on my body stand up. It sounded like slow breathing coming from the direction of the cul-de-sac. Deep, steady breathing, like someone standing under my window, but not close enough to be seen. I stayed frozen until it faded. The next morning I walked to my car and saw a long scratch along the driver's side door. It wasn't random. It curved upward, like someone had dragged a tool across it while moving around the car. There was another stick formation near my front tire. At this point, I was convinced someone was living in that tunnel. Someone who knew when people entered. Someone who collected things. Someone who watched. I talked to a neighbor who'd lived there since the early 2000s. He said the city had expanded the neighborhood over an older drainage system and never updated the plans. Some sections weren't mapped anymore. He said teenagers used to hear voices in the tunnels years ago, but adults always ignored it. The HOA had once tried to block the entrance, but the boards went missing overnight. I wanted to ignore everything and move on, but two events pushed it too far. The first was when I found fresh footprints leading from the tunnel straight toward my driveway, then turning around and going back underground. Bare footprints, not shoe prints. The second was when someone knocked on my door at 4 a.m. It wasn't frantic, just one slow knock, then a long pause, then another. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there, but from the end of the street, I heard that same dragging sound, slow and steady, moving toward the tunnel entrance. I moved out 2 weeks later. I didn't sell the house right away. I left it sitting empty. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care if people thought I was overreacting. I just wanted distance. Before I left for good, I drove by the cul-de-sac one last time. The tunnel entrance was still open. Someone had placed another stick formation right in the center of it, bigger than the others, with something hanging from the top piece. A key, one of my old house keys. I never went back. When I moved into that small Arizona neighborhood, I didn't know anything about the old agricultural system the land used to be part of. The houses were built on top of what used to be farmland, decades before the suburbs went up. The whole area was networked with irrigation channels and underground tunnels that carried water to citrus groves. Most of the old structures were filled in before construction. At least, that's what everyone believed. Around the time I moved in, people talked about occasional sinkholes showing up near the community fence line, but nobody seemed concerned. They acted like it was just part of the desert settling. My house sat near the dead end of a street that bordered a patch of scrubby desert. It wasn't open land. It was more like leftover space the developers never bothered to clear. A few mesquite trees, brittle bushes, and dry soil that cracked in summer. I took evening walks there after work because it felt quiet and gave me space to think. One night, after a rare stretch of rain, I saw a section of the ground collapsed inward. It wasn't dramatic, just a shallow dip in the soil. When I stepped closer, I noticed a hole in the side of the depression. There was a concrete edge inside it. The dirt had pulled away, revealing the top rim of an old tunnel. When I pushed some loose soil aside, the opening got clear enough to see inside. The tunnel was wide enough for a person to crawl through. The walls were old concrete, cracked and stained from decades of water flow. I didn't feel any air moving, but something about the tunnel didn't look abandoned. There were marks on the concrete floor, tracks from something being pushed or dragged. Not animal tracks, more like heavy objects moved repeatedly over time. I didn't crawl on that first day. I just made a mental note to stay away from the collapse. But over the next week, I noticed something strange. Every time I passed the spot, the entrance looked slightly cleared. Someone had moved the loose dirt. Someone had pushed the brush aside. It didn't look like an animal because the clearing was too neat. The opening was kept visible, almost like someone wanted access to it. One morning, I found a boot print in the soil next to the dip. Not a fresh one, but not old either. It was pointed directly toward the tunnel. I should have reported it, but at that point it didn't feel like a threat. More like the weird discovery you file under neighborhood oddities. I didn't bring it up to neighbors because I didn't want to sound paranoid, but I kept checking on it. The more I looked, the more signs I noticed. A thin piece of rope near the edge of the hole, a crushed can tucked inside the opening, a torn scrap of tarp caught on a crack. Then things started happening closer to home. 2 weeks after I first noticed the tunnel, I came outside early in the morning and found dusty footprints on my back patio. Not shoe prints, barefoot prints. They led from the corner of my yard near the desert patch to the sliding glass door. 5 prints, all facing toward the house. The prints didn't continue. It was like whoever made them walked up to the house, stood there for a while, and then left through the same route without leaving a second set. I cleaned them up but kept checking the patio every day. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of something shifting outside. Not loudly, just enough to feel like someone was moving around near the fence. When I stepped out to look through the blinds, everything was still. Javelinas sometimes roamed near that area, but the sound didn't match them. It was too controlled, too slow. The next morning, there was a long scratch across the metal part of the side gate. It looked like someone dragged something across it. I went back to the collapse that afternoon, planning to take more pictures. When I got there, the entrance was even more exposed. Someone had cleared a full 2 feet of dirt from around it. The tunnel opening was wide enough to crawl into without any struggle. And now there was something else. A faint smell coming from inside. Not sewage or rot. More like old damp mixed with dirt. Something that had been underground too long. I shined my flashlight inside for the first time. The beam showed the tunnel stretching 20 or 30 feet before bending left. Dirt was scattered along the floor, and there were drag marks again. I also noticed something reflecting light. When I reached in and pulled it out, it turned out to be a keyring. No keys on it, just a ring, a cheap metal one. When I cleaned the dirt off, I noticed faint scratches on it, like someone had rubbed it against a rough surface many times. I didn't like the feeling building in my stomach. I walked away fast. That night, I woke up again. This time from a sound I recognized immediately. My backyard gate latch shifting. Not enough to open the gate, but enough to make the metal click. I stayed still and listened. A few seconds passed. Then came the soft crunch of someone stepping on gravel. Then nothing. In the morning, I checked the yard. No new footprints, but the gate had a small bundle tied around the latch. 3 thin sticks, bound with a strip of cloth. It looked deliberate. I took it off with gloves and tossed it in the trash. I called a friend who lived across town and told him what I'd been noticing. I didn't explain everything, just enough that he told me to notify the sheriff. I didn't call them that day. I didn't know what I'd even report. A few nights later, I got a clearer picture of what I was dealing with. I was outside locking my shed and heard something moving behind the fence. Slow steps, less than 10 feet away. I froze. The steps stopped too. Then I heard a long, steady breath. Not panicked, not tired, just steady. The kind you hear from someone standing in the dark, trying not to make noise. I didn't move. After maybe 10 seconds, the breathing stopped. Then the steps moved away, heading toward the desert. I grabbed a strong flashlight and walked along the fence. When I reached the corner, I shined the light toward the scrubland. The collapse where the tunnel opening sat was only 20 yards away. My light hit the entrance. Dirt was scattered everywhere, freshly disturbed, and someone had placed something on the concrete lip. It was the strip of cloth I had thrown away. The dirt on it was new. Someone had taken it out of my trash, walked it back to the tunnel, and set it on display. That was the moment I felt the shift. Whoever was using that tunnel wasn't avoiding me. They were watching me, following what I touched, moving things I threw away, getting closer each time. The next morning, I planned to drive straight to the sheriff's office. But before I left, I walked toward the desert one last time. The tunnel entrance was now partially blocked by a large piece of plywood propped against the opening, not fully covering it, just leaning there. Someone had tried to make it look abandoned again, but the dirt showed recent footprints. More than one set, some barefoot, some with worn rubber soles, all leading into the opening. That afternoon I left work early and came home to grab something. When I unlocked my front door and pushed it open, something caught my eye immediately. A thin line of dirt leading from the back door to the center of my living room. Small clumps of dried soil spaced apart, like someone dripping it off their foot. No sign of a break-in. Nothing moved. Nothing stolen. Just that line. As if someone walked in, stood there, then walked back out. I checked the back sliding door. The lock was still engaged, but the tiny gap at the bottom of the frame had dirt lodged inside it, like someone had tried to lift the door slightly from the outside. My stomach dropped. I left and didn't come back that night. A co-worker convinced me to stay at his place for a few days. When I returned that weekend, I found something sitting next to my front door. A small pile of sticks arranged in a triangle. In the center of it was my flashlight, the one I had dropped while locking the shed that night. I moved out the next month. The house sat empty for a while before I finally listed it. The new buyers didn't ask about the desert collapse, and I didn't bring it up. A few weeks after I moved to my new place, I checked the neighborhood Facebook group out of curiosity. Someone posted a picture of a new sinkhole that formed near the same area. The dirt collapsed deeper this time, exposing more of the old irrigation tunnel. People joked about it. Kids said they wanted to explore. The HOA promised to block it off. I didn't comment. Sometimes I think about the footprints, the breathing, the dirt trail inside my house, the sticks, the way the tunnel always seemed cleared no matter how much soil fell into it. And I can't stop wondering how many of those tunnels still run under the neighborhood. How many other openings are hidden under nothing more than a few inches of desert soil, and whether someone is still moving through them at night.